Welcome to the Work Well, Live Well podcast. I am your host, Leanne, and I am passionate about teaching people how to bring out the best in themselves and others, both personally and professionally. I focus on sharing interviews, thoughts, and research-based tools and strategies that help you to work well and live well. Today, I'm chatting with Chief Happiness Officer Scott Crabtree from Happy Brain Science. His tips to improve our happiness are practical and really interesting. I hope you enjoy this chat as much as I did. So let's get started. Scott, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Leanne. It's great to be with you.
I've been really looking forward to having a chat with you because I often use your videos around energy management in my mindfulness classes, and it's wonderful to be speaking to you. So, would you be able to share with us, please, how did you become the Chief Happiness Officer?
It's a bit of an accident, to be honest, Leanne. I did not see this coming. I used to hear that people averaged, I think it's 2.3 careers. Maybe that's US data, I'm not sure. But I was like, that's interesting. What would I ever do besides lead the design and development of video games and other software? I don't know what else I would do. And then I was working at Intel, and my wife went into Powell's bookstore here in Portland, Oregon. And there was a book turned sideways called The How of Happiness by Sonia Lyubomirsky. And I thought, How of Happiness? What's this? And I looked on the back, and there was a review from Harvard professor Daniel Gilbert saying, unlike every other book on happiness, this one is based on quality experimental data and will work. I thought, science of happiness, good enough for a Harvard professor, good enough for me. So I bought and read The How of Happiness, and it was my introduction to the fact that there was a science of happiness, that we all can make choices that lead to increased happiness, and that if we do that, our brains fundamentally work better in most situations. Plus, we're healthier, live longer, we're better people, etc. So I finished that book and thought, this is one of the most amazing things I've ever come across in my life, like solid data about choices we can make to boost our well-being. Sign me up. I want to do this. I want to be this. I want to enjoy all these benefits. And about 6 seconds later, I thought, you're not going to do that, Scott. You're going to forget 95% of this in 6 months, the way we forget 95% of most things we learn in 6 months. How can you not forget this? And what popped to mind for me, both my parents were teachers. What popped to mind for me is if you really want to learn something, you should teach it. So I started volunteering at conferences at Intel and in the game development world that I was in, started volunteering to give science of happiness talks at software conferences, talks like the science of happiness in video game development and things like that. And the conferences started saying yes. So I said, wow, I've got to learn everything I can about this science of happiness, bought more books, read more research articles, talked to more people. And I delivered those sessions, and it was just amazing, Leanne. I mean, I had always felt good about my career. I was always making educational video games I felt were helpful to people. But I never had people stopping me in the hall saying, dude, that thing you presented a couple weeks ago totally changed the way that I'm interacting with my team and my teenage daughter at home. Things are much better. Thank you. I'm like, whoa, this is really getting a response from people. And my own internal reaction was just, I felt so full of joy helping people learn what to me is this amazing new science. So it kind of went viral in a non-internet way. People kept asking me if I could do presentations like that. And eventually people started asking me who were at other companies. And I said, for money, you want me to come and do this? And they said, yes. And I thought, I'm going to quit Intel and see if I can do this full time. And that was about 7 years ago. So I have been blessed by stumbling into a career that has been full of joy and meaning for me.
It sounds wonderful, and it's so great to do something that brings you to life, isn't it?
Exactly. I had friends around me saying, you're all lit up about this science of happiness stuff. And I was like, maybe I should do more with this then. So here I am.
So, Scott, if research tells us that 40% of happiness is determined by choice, how do we put our minds to it, and what can we do to boost our happiness?
Yeah, great questions. Let me first, if I may, Leanne, just add a little color commentary on the 40%, because I believe that comes where I first learned that was the book I mentioned, The How of Happiness by Sonia Lyubomirsky. I have had the good pleasure of interacting with her in a couple of ways through the International Positive Psychology Association, which I know you and I are both members of. And by the way, that means a lot. When somebody's a member of IPA, I know that they're serious about the science and not just opinion about happiness. So anyway, through IPA, through the International Positive Psychology Association, I've been able to interact with Sonia and ask her about that 40%. And she has backpedaled a bit and said, this is a rough estimation based on lots of data. But the reality is that our choices affect our circumstances, which affect our choices, which even affect our genes. So if you take two twins, they're separated at birth and adopted in different families, they end up with slightly different genes called epigenetics. So what I tell my audience is I sometimes show that graph, that pie chart with 40% of your happiness coming from your choices. I tell them it's all messy. In fact, I make the graph messy. I don't make it clean lines on 40%. I make it blurred because everything's affecting each other. And the 40%, it's really 40% of the difference between your happiness level and a different person's happiness level. So all of that is just to clarify that it's kind of rough and messy when we say about 40% of our happiness. But still, it's a great question. What can we do to choose more happiness? Lots of things. I have a lot of different workshops and presentations, keynotes that I give for a living. The one that I give the most often I call The Science of Being Happy and Productive at Work. And that is basically my 3 to 4 hour answer to your question. So we don't have 3 or 4 hours here. So in 3 or 4 minutes, I'll see if I can tell you about the 4 themes that I organize those choices. So the first is subdue stress, because stress and happiness are not the same thing, but it's hard to be high stress and high happiness at the same time. Usually if we're very high stress, we're low happiness. Usually if we're lower stress, we're higher happiness. And as you likely know, Leanne, that the science is clear that how we cope with life's inevitable difficulties and hardships is a major factor in our well-being. Some of us don't cope very well, we end up unhealthy and miserable, and others cope well with the same difficulties, and they come out happier and healthier. So subduing stress is about, first of all, reframing stress as a helpful source of energy. We don't have to stress about our stress. Moderate stress is actually helpful. So you may have seen, your watchers and readers and listeners may have seen Kelly McGonigal's great TED Talk about how if you view stress as a helpful source of energy, our body responds in a more healthy way to it. So part of it is reframing stress, but it's also coping effectively with things like physical exercise, social support, that is talking with friends, and I know one of your favorites and mine, mindfulness. All great ways of coping with stress. So that's subdue stress. Second set of choices to boost happiness, I call practice positivity. And frankly, this is a bunch of corny, cheesy sounding stuff that people have likely heard before about positive attitude. So why would I include it? Because science says that all that corny sounding stuff about positive attitude really works. When we look on the bright side, when we find the silver lining, when we see the best in each other and each other's work, we feed our brains more happiness, and therefore our brain works better. So optimism works, and all that stuff about have a good attitude, you can roll your eyes at it if you have to, but try to find your way to a positive attitude because it really helps. Third theme in my happiness workshop I call flow to goals, and that's about the importance of progress towards clear and meaningful goals. In Western societies, we're very goal-oriented. That's great. Lots of studies show that having goals boosts performance, but we're so goal-oriented that we forget sometimes to savor the progress along the way. And Harvard professor Teresa Amabile led a team showing how important progress towards clear and meaningful goals is. So it's about having clear, meaningful goals, progress towards those goals, the delightfully productive, focused zone that we can get in that psychologists call flow, where everything is clicking and you're completely focused on something challenging but possible. And I also include in that section the perils of multitasking, the myth of multitasking. When we feel like we can pay attention to two things at once, we can't, and we tend to make ourselves stupid and miserable. And it is a short, cheeky way of putting the science. And then finally, that leads to the fourth, and in many ways the most important theme, which is prioritize people, invest in relationships. For most of us, most of the time, the data suggests the quality of our relationships is a central source of our well-being. And so when we forgive people, when we're nice to people, when we celebrate and savor the good things with people, when we express specific gratitude with people, when we bring some empathy and some compassion to our relationships, both us and the people we're relating with end up happier. So long story, a bit shortened up, those are some of the categories of choices we can make to boost our happiness and therefore our effectiveness at work and just in life.
Yeah. How does happiness help us at work?
Yeah. I think the simplest way of putting it is that happiness brings prime brain real estate online, if you will. So a bit of a weird analogy, but fundamentally, and this is a bit oversimplified, people can dive into the science and learn the subtleties here if they'd like to, but at the simplest level, our brain is in one of two modes: avoid risks and protect ourselves, or explore opportunities and maximize rewards. And when we're in the latter stage, we're going to thrive at work. We're going to be looking for opportunities. We're going to be thinking creatively. We're going to be reaching out to people. We're going to be bringing our best brain to work, the one that looks at all the possibilities, our uniquely human layers of cortex, loosely speaking, right under the skull that do some of our best work. Those go to the front burner, if you will. They get more oxygen and glucose going to the brain, and we think better. We think more creatively. When we're unhappy, to whatever degree we're unhappy, our brain is figuratively shrinking. If we're in full-on fight or flight mode, then it's really the limbic system and the brainstem at the center of our brains and the base of our brains that are on the front burner, if you will. And when we're in fight or flight, which is not a switch, it's a continuum, right? So we can be a little bit guarded or full-on panicked. But to whatever degree we're toward fight or flight, our brain sees three and only three solutions to problems: fight, run, or, although we hear about it less because it doesn't rhyme, number one response to intense stress is just freeze. Because if we shut up and stay still, the mountain lion, at least in my country, the mountain lion might not see you and you might get away that way. Those three options are great for dealing with predators on a hike. You know, so an animal that can kill you, fight, run, or freeze, great options. If you're at work, those options tend not to be so fruitful, right? When we get stressed out at work, we're still wired to survive encounters with dangerous animals. So we go to fight, flight, or freeze, but they don't help us negotiate a difficult situation with a client. They don't help us mend a relationship that's gone wrong with a colleague. They don't help us do our best work because they figuratively shrink our brains. So for me, choosing happiness at work is choosing to use all of your brain at work, and not just the defensive limited parts, but the parts that are looking and exploring for the best possible ways forward.
I know definitely when I'm not happy, I don't think straight. I'm not creative. I'm not thinking outside of the box, so to speak.
Our energy comes down, our choices come down, our brain function comes down. And it's not universally true. I don't want to overstate this. There are times when unpleasant emotions are normal, natural, healthy, and helpful. But most of the time, we perform better in a good mood than a bad mood.
Yeah. You've developed a game for happiness at work.
I have.
How does it help us to cultivate happiness in the workplace? Or could you tell us a bit about it?
Sure. As luck would have it, I have a copy right here. So it's called Choose Happiness at Work. And you don't need to have played either of these other games, but you or some of your watchers, listeners may have played either Apples to Apples, or dare I bring up the awful card game Cards Against Humanity. If you played either one of those, you have a head start on the play mechanic here. So basically, there is a big deck. This is most of it. I couldn't quite grab all of it. There's a deck of over 50 common problems that show up at work. They tend to be people, motivation, morale problems. So for example, randomly here, I discovered that a colleague seems to be taking credit for the work I've done, or I spend too much time in ineffective meetings, or I work very long hours, or I'm very grouchy and irritable at work. So typical problems that show up for us at work. And we have an executive role. The executive picks two of those problems off the top of the deck, chooses which one she's most interested in solving, and then tells everyone else about it. And then everyone else is holding 7 of these science-based solution cards that I'm trying to fish out of the box here. So this much bigger deck are science-based solutions, and these match the categories that I just told you about from the workshop. So there are solutions that are focused on subduing stress, practicing positivity, flowing to goals, and revitalizing relationships. So everyone else sitting at the table has 7 of these cards in their hand, and they're looking for a good solution to that problem. So say somebody said, I'm feeling grouchy and irritable at work today. You might suggest to them that they practice specific gratitude. Or if you don't feel like you have a great match, you can sometimes try to get funny or creative. So I might play, dude, you need a snack. You need an antioxidant snack to bring your mood up here. And then the executive who selected the problem, they get a variety of options and they choose the best solution, that's 2 points, and most creative or humorous solution that gets 1 point. And then the executive role rotates around the table. So the idea behind this, game designers like me call games like this serious games. That is, it's supposed to be fun, but the primary point is not fun. The primary point is to learn and apply the science of happiness at work.
Yeah.
And so what people report who play the game, they report that they learn about the science of happiness and each other by playing together. And games are just a fun way to bring energy up and allow people to do things they wouldn't do in a serious situation. So, for example, Leanne, one of the things we hear from players is there are real problems for our organization in these cards. And the game gives me a safe way to raise those issues. So I must work closely with somebody who is negative and complains a lot. That's a risky thing for me to say in a team meeting of 12 people at work, right? Oh, who are you talking about? You're being very negative. But if the game raises the issue for me, oh, I'm just picking this card. What do you think? It gives me a safe way to surface problems. Yeah. So those are the cards in a nutshell. They can be used in the game way that I just described. They can also be used to facilitate discussion. And people have fun and learn things, which is really what I was after when I designed the game.
Yeah, and you know, everything that you've just read off of those cards is very relatable to every workplace, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm afraid we all share some of the same problems. You know, yeah. I spent most of my career, I spent multiple decades in technology companies, large and small, a lot of video game development companies, but also big companies like Intel. And working at a variety of organizations, I kept seeing the same problems show up. You know, politics always drag people down at work. Long, boring meetings where you're sitting too often always bring people down. And time again, I hear from people, you know, I talk to people who do very technical work. They are literally rocket scientists or computer software engineers or whatever. And they say, all my technical problems are easy compared to the human problems and the relationship problems that we tend to have at work. So there's a lot of those in there as well.
What is your #1 tip for happiness? And is there a book or a tool besides your wonderful game that you would recommend?
I am a giant fan of Sonia Lyubomirsky, who I mentioned earlier. I think her book, The How of Happiness, remains my favorite book. It's a few years old now, but it's very actionable. It's very concrete and specific, and it helps us find a good fit between the science and who we are, right? So a critical point here, Leanne, is that science produces averages from large groups of people. But you're not an average, and somebody watching this, listening to this, they're not an average either. They're a unique person, right? So the question isn't what works for most people. The question is what works for you. And The How of Happiness does a really good job of relating that. So that and other books are on a free recommended reading list that I have on my site, happybrainscience.com. Brainscience.com has a recommended reading list, and that is one of many great books on the science of happiness. And then I think the best tip that science has found, I want to be careful here because I ground everything I do in science, and the following is not yet published in a peer-reviewed academic journal, but it comes from, I was lucky enough to have dinner with Sonia Lyubomirsky at the International Positive Psychology Association World Congress in Montreal last summer. And one of my colleagues asked her, Sonia, what's some unpublished research you're working on that's exciting to you? And she talked about research that she and her colleagues have done that has found the biggest boost in well-being of anything they've found so far. And oversimplified, that technique is act like an extrovert. So now I know that some of your listeners may be introverts, and they may be, oh, that's not me. It's exhausting for me to talk to people. It's hard for me to talk to people. Sure, you extroverts say that, but that's hard for me. Well, what the science has found is that for both introverts and extroverts, when we get a bit of social interaction, it boosts our mood. And so the way to make this concrete is elevator rides. I know it's awkward. I get in elevators and there's a person there I don't know, and I'm like, is this person going to be nice? Or are they going to be mean? Maybe they want to be left alone. How many seconds are we going to have together? And I often say nothing. But since hearing this study from Sonia Lyubomirsky that said basically when we act like extroverts, our mood goes up, I try to come out of my shell and I try to reach out and I just say, hello, or how's your day going? Or are you here for work? Are you here for a conference? And 99 times out of 100, I step out of that elevator in a better mood than I got into it if I'm willing to take that chance. So the one tip I would leave with you and everyone else is, even if you don't feel like it, even if you call yourselves introverts, try acting like an extrovert for a minute or three and see what happens to your mood. Experiment with your own life.
Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate the time that you've taken. Well, for me this morning, for you this evening,
Yes.
For this interview, and most grateful, and put some pep in my step for my day as I started. I'll talk to people. I don't have elevators where I am at the moment, but that's fine.
It can be a bus or a cab ride or just a sidewalk, whatever, walk on the street. So, Leanne, great to connect with you. Thank you so much. Thanks for being a source of positivity in the world and mindfulness in the world and well-being and resilience. We need all that. And I'm honored and delighted to get to talk with you for a bit, and maybe we'll get to do it again sometime.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Take care.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me. To find out more about Scott and Happy Brain Science, go to his website, www.happybrainscience.com. You'll also find the link in the podcast notes. I hope that you've enjoyed this chat with Scott as much as I did. If you want to purchase his game, you can do so through his website, and I also have his games here in Australia. So, bye for now.